Hello and welcome to this Propellerheads Reason Synthesizer Lab tutorial. I'm your host, Marcus Unlimited. Happy to be here with you, by the way. What we're going to do here is we are going to start with a raw initialized subtractor, and I am going to show you what I believe to be the most underrated device inside of Reason. And this works for all versions of Reason. This synth has been there since the beginning, and there's a reason for that. We could talk about that philosophy. I might bring some more in on that. But let's put it this way. When they knew what had to be there, they started with Subtractor. So as far as all of these devices, that was the thing that had to be there. Um, I've been programming synthesizers actually since I was a kid, and that was decades ago. In fact, I purchased my first Roland Juno 106, which oddly looks kind of alike. I even noticed that some of the colors kind of lean towards a hint at that maybe. And I purchased that through when I was a kid. I had the largest paper route in town, and I was absolutely obsessed with getting that thing and delivering papers 365 days a year, my birthday and Christmas Day. I even once had the chicken pox, God, and was still delivering through that. So that's how much I was into that. And on all of my albums, I currently have 9 albums out, and of course, around the time that 9 came out, by then people just releasing directly to YouTube, it happened and such. And so just a little backstory on how long I've been working with synths. we're going to start with waveform number 1. Now, how I planned out this tutorial is I noticed that there were a lot of people who I've seen a lot of patches, and these waveforms are not really used to their full potential, and they're pretty amazing. They were really well thought out when they were originally constructed. So what we're going to do first is something you should always do when programming patches, in my opinion, is if you're an artist, you want to start with a blank piece of paper. This way you always know what you're starting with, right? You know, a blank canvas, and you want to know the canvas type and all of that. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to right click, and I'm going to select Reset Device. What this does is this takes whatever's going on here, and it usually comes up as a bass guitar, and then sometimes you might have another patch in it and you want to start programming. Reset Device takes everything into this particular sound. So this is our basic Sawtooth wave here, and this is kind of what people like to call the general purpose wave. So I'm going to go through a number of parameters here and show you how to achieve different effects with this device here. So here's our basic stock sound. And the first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of that kind of lifeless sustain. So we're going to go to our actual amplitude over here. And we're going to also reduce our decay a little bit. So we see that just by affecting just purely our amplitude envelope, we kind of get something cool happening already. And that's kind of the sound of, not to go Wayne Dyer on you, but that's kind of the sound of intention. You're intending to add some beauty to something, just thinking, you know, bel canto affects the singer's voice, you know what I mean? Like just the fact that you're thinking about, I'm not just putting some sound out here, we're getting little subtlety too. We've got a sustain remaining on there, but it's subtle. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fatten the patch, and this is a common concept you'll hear people talking about, and some people may have never fully understood how to do that. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in the second oscillator. Now, you'll notice that as I bring it in, it did the exact opposite of fattening the patch. It thinned it out. That's because they're identical pitch-wise, and they're literally phasing because they're on the same pitch. So what I like to do as a general rule of thumb, and this again is one of those cool philosophies of, you know how we always started with the reset device? A methodology that I generally like to use is if something is going to be higher pitched, even if it's by just the cents here, um, or semitones, and certainly an octave, if it's going to be higher pitch, I'll use the higher oscillator. So we see how this oscillator is above. I know it seems, but believe it or not, when you really get into patch, it's really good to know where everything is at so you can return to things and touch base with things. So throwing down an F major chord here. Let's take the sense, and let's go to, I don't know. Let's give it. Let's go for a polyphony of 10. And we hear that there's already been a tremendous amount of depth. What's happening is this one is coming out just a smidge higher in pitch than this one, but they're basically attempting to play the same note per se. And then we could add some more here. And as you see, it's getting more and more chorused. And now we have something that, with a little release, sounds really nice. In fact, we could go like, now, as I started to move around the keyboard, started to notice our sound isn't sounding the same throughout the keyboard. Here it's getting more broad into the resonant and frequency-based aspect of the filter, and up here it's backing away from the frequency, and that is because our keyboard tracking is currently set to 0. So one of my favorite places to initially go to is right about the center there. The exact center is 60. Now we pulled up one. We'll watch when we slide over this. You see how it's saying that the keyboard tracking is 63? A way to get exact is I'm going to press the Shift key on my keyboard while I left click and mouse up a bit. And there we go. And that's how you get at minute changes. If you're ever like, gosh, how do I control this knob? Just hold down the Shift key. And I know some of you already know many of these things. Some of you don't, though. And I've been surprised, too. Like, even though as long as I've been doing this, every once in a while, I'll be watching or listening to a tutorial, and someone will make one little comment about, oh, did you know that this one keyboard shortcut? And I'm like, oh my God, and it's something that's tucked away in a big bad manual somewhere, and all that. So we're here now, and we have something that sounds more. You see how it sounds? We hear a touch of our bright frequency. We hear a touch of our bright frequency. And now we hear a touch of our bright frequency at the top end of things too. We could, I think that's a little high, so now I'm going to back down to kind of about the 25% mark here, which since our numbers go to 127, that's actually a little more kind of in the 30s, closer to, well, approximately 30. There we go. So our frequency is a little bit subtle now that we've tracked it across the keyboard there in that manner. Okay, so now we got a pretty fat tone, but there is a great trick. You'll notice I haven't reached for the thing that many people, I want to say, even if they're skilled, it's kind of honestly an entry-level move. And folks, I'm very lucky. I've had my hands on some incredible synthesizers throughout my life. I know all kinds of cool little subtle secrets, and I'm going to give all those secrets to you in these tutorials. I don't want to talk about the future. I'm a big fan of rather than talking about the long-term goal list, but you'll notice that we're working with waveform number 1, right? This whole lab, in fact, I'm not going to allow myself to change the second waveform or anything like that. We're literally going to work with single waveforms, stack an octave, and also, too, I wanted to show you there is nothing in this rack. This is it. This is our device going to our audio output, and that is it. That is one of the important things of synthesizer programming too, is save the effects for later, and after a while your ear will adjust to the idea of which type of sounds will want which type of effects. But I'm going to tell you right now, the cleaner and tighter you keep it, all done in the instrument. I mean, there's a reason why some fantastic fantastic guitars cost like, you know, $1,000 for technically a piece of wood and some strings, is because there's been such an effort to get a certain type of wood and a certain quality of string and a certain. So, anyways, same for us in our electronic world. Um, think of ourselves as classical electronic musicians. You know what I mean? I'll say so. That's why I'm avoiding this resonance thing. And I'm going to touch this for just a second, then I'm going to pull it back down to zero. So we're all very familiar, you know, okay, wow, 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 you know, that's the biggest, you know, that's the biggest way you can grab something and affect the sound, and it instantly starts changing and everything. But those changes are pretty generic. Well, this is Marcus Unlimited, and you are a member of the Unlimited Society. So we're going to show you a really awesome way of. You want to hear something happen to that attack? Check this out. This is one of my favorite things to do. So I'm going to go to the second oscillator. I want to play with the second oscillator here. Do I? Yes. Okay, so now what I want is I want the front of the sound to just punch, to really punch, you know? So what we're going to do is we have our modulation envelope is going to come in, and as you see right now, this default decay here is perfect for what I want to do. We'll probably make an adjustment there, but what's going to happen is the sound's going to start immediately, and then there's going to be this you know 40 count, as you see our numbers there shows us, of the modulation envelope working on our waveform. So here it's doing nothing, and then I'm going to add some. Okay, what was that? Was it? All right, so we got a smack happening at the top of that sound now. Let's take it all the way just to show you for a second. Okay, so now we have something that sounds, it sounds a little bit like the resonant filter, but it's kind of cleaner and classier. And you notice as we add the resonant filter, we start getting all kinds of interesting distortion, and then we have to go in and play with a bunch of levels, because this is like this should be, to me, the last thing you play with. So now we got something kind of cool. We have an attack, but it's like a laser attack. And here's what's happening. It's basically jumping the pitch up. So in fact, let me let you hear it slowly. Let me really drag this out. Pretty happening. So what's happening is it's taking our second oscillator here, and it's starting it this much higher, you know, 127 points there higher, so to say. And then by this decay, it's decaying away. It's decaying away from the 127 and pulling back slowly, and then it's evening out finally to the setting that we have across here. That is how the modulation envelope works. So this would be great for some kind of end of song effect. You have this subtle chord with a cool thing on there. However, what we're going to do is I'm going to pull this back because I want more of a top of sound effect. And it's a bit heavy. It's a bit heavy, so let me pull this. There we go. That's kind of what I was thinking. Okay, so now we got this cool. Okay, all right, so cool. We kind of have like an 80s influenced kind of strum synth type thing. So we have a cool thing there, and right now, even there's a few little clips and stuff. That's actually not my actual genuine card. What's happening there is, in order to get a pretty clean sounding recording in with the voiceover at the same time, I'm having to kind of send it into kind of like tricking the computer into thinking that I'm playing a video game, so to say. So a couple of the little pops and clicks that aren't normal there, because I have a fantastic. I'm actually not even using my really cool. I have a really cool outboard device called the Focusrite. And it's really clean sounding, but I'm not using it right now. I'm using the basically I'm getting the machine to think, okay, this is a video game, and we're recording my video game output. So you'll hear a couple little pops and clicks every once in a while, but don't worry about it. That's not going to happen with your sound. So that's just to get the tutorial happening. So now we have our all right. Get that hair gel going. Did you know that the greatest hair gel on earth is lime juice? Yeah, be careful because lime juice is pretty strong, but that's actually, since I'm vegan, that's what I use, and I'm just going to throw that tip out there. And if you want more of like a bedhead look, you actually use a little coconut oil. And you'll be careful with either one of those because every once in a while someone has a little, you know, sometimes either one of those can be strong for something, but that's what I use. Anyways, I just thought of that because back in the day, back in the day when I was a kid, it was like, oh my God, I couldn't like go to school without hair gel because it was 1984. All right. Okay, so all right, so let's go here and let's do our thing here. Now, so I like what's happening here. I think it could be like a little bit heavy. To be slower. So slower means to increase the decay. There we go. Okay, so we have a pretty nice synth sound there. So let's take a look. Now I'm noticing the sustain to me sounds a little bit bland. And I'm telling you, if you get these things happening before you add in the effects, man, it brings such life to your tracks. And you can hear a whole lot of that life on my Chromaticus albums. I'll put a link maybe or something down in the bottom there. It's on Spotify, it's on iTunes. And even though it was designed especially to take people off to dreamland for sleeping, and I know that every once in a while, every single one of us has trouble sleeping. When you get to album 3, which is Chromaticus Hydroicus, I released it years ago by now. Album 3, every single sound on there is custom programmed in the subtractor because I wanted this world to happen that wasn't just someone grabbing a standard stock sample. So you can listen to Chromaticus, Hydroicus, and I think one version of it, they have this like light blue cover. I'm trying to remember what was going on with the artwork of that one. And anyways, I'll find it and put it up there. But the whole album is just stacks and stacks of this, and it's not dance either. It's like, I want to say, like almost like a modern synthesizer classical thing. So you might have fun with that. So this is good, but our ending, our sustain here, we have a nice rich attack, but what's left there is yeah, I don't know, man, kind of a little bit bland. So you know what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the second LFO. The second LFO, since it's non-syncable, we can sync our first LFO. So I want to save that in case we want some sync effects here. For the second LFO, I want to do something with this ending. So I kind of already know where I'm headed with this. It's not going to be the phase. I just want oscillators 1 and 2. Remember, they're this far apart. I want them to kind of wobble a bit more. So, okay, pretty absurd, but that lets us know where we're at. So, okay, now. However, I loved our attack before this, so we're going to pull our delay up here out of the way. So now we hear it's adding some life in the background. Remember, folks, this is completely dry. We don't even have it buried in a track yet, you know, so we already have our... So, pretty good. I think I wanted to get a little, kind of a little dizzy there. There we go. Okay, cool, nice. We'll let it ring off a little bit. I might want some of that picked up by Might want to leave a little room there for the reverb to do its work, but again, we can hear it from a place where it's at there. Now, let's find out what happens when we've widened it. Now, remember I was talking like to keep my lower pitches on the second oscillator since it's just literally physically below on screen, and I can think it through that way. I'm also going to, just for safety, since there's 12 notes in the chromatic scale, let me just pump that up to 12, you know, just for that purpose. I really like this, but I still want it wider. I want more out of it. So let's see what happens if we drop our second oscillator. Well, I'll tell you what. Huge, and that's what you can do to make a sound, say, huger or tremendously large, so to say. But you know what? We also lose a little bit of our face fatness. So what I'm going to do instead is, let me see how far apart we can get this. Okay, so now we have, since computers like powers of 2, there, let's make it happy. Okay, I think we got some great stuff here happening in the mid lows, but our high end, we might want to have some arpeggiation, get at some things later. I think the top end is kind of, honestly, a little useless. So we don't want the filter to apply itself to the top end, so we're going to lean it. Literally, even though this is could lead to a very high-tech explanation, let's think of this here as this is how much, think of this like plain English sentence. How much of this do you want affecting this side of the keyboard or this side? So we want it to lean heavy on the lows and mids here. And I can see we're going to have to make a little adjustment. There we go, there we go, there we go. So now we got something. Now we have something that's pretty usable. That way, if we set up our arpeggiator and have it skyrocketing all over kind of a bunch of different octaves, we have something that sounds pretty hot down in this area. But when we adjust our keyboard, we lost a little bit of our what we want on our main thing, so we're going to add, there we go, that's fun. And I want this to have, so 22 looks a bit high, so let's pull this back to, let's see, about 20, and again, I'm holding down the shift key to get that precision. There, ooh, there we go. Get my mic cord out of the way here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so there we go. So let's just hear a few other chords just here, so pretty good in a major thing. What happens if you Okay, so definitely leans in favor of the major thing. Now, I still think there's something we could add here that should be interesting, and I think I'm going to play with. I don't want the velocity to do anything unpredictable, so I'm actually going to pull this off of our velocity affectation and just have it affected here. What's going to happen is, see, if we have it affected by velocity, we're going to get all these like little unpredictable things in there, and there are some sounds that we might definitely want that. But for the Sawtooth, usually people are going for a sound, you know, that's usually where you want. We're going to get into the other waveforms, then you want some of that unpredictability happening. But with this, I want this basically reliably happening each time, and we're still staying away from this happens last. So, and I think I want let's add a little bit of organic sound to it. So we're gonna just a touch of FM, and I'm gonna have the way I have these set up, they're not really going to currently interact with FM too much. So let's see what we have to work with here. Velocity. Okay, this could be a subtle thing. Our mix between the oscillator 1 and oscillator 2, I think I'm going to have, since I want something subtle, there we go. Okay, nice. So what's going to happen is as I'm turning it towards the positive interaction, what's going to happen is, as I play it, I don't want it to affect that much, but the harder I play it, basically, it's actually going to thin out. So here's me playing it soft, and we hear it has a broader sound, and then there's me really slamming it down, and we hear it kind of thins out. I actually want it to do the opposite. So let's see if we can have it head over here. All right, pretty good. A little more subtle, please. That's all. Back it off. Okay, all right. So let's go back to our original thing. Okay, so this sounds this is about the sound I was originally envisioning to build here. I intentionally want to stay away from that thing where we just take the sustain and crank it all the way up to the roof. The reason I wanted to do that is because you've heard that so much, and it takes nothing. And this is really an underrated tool for sweetening up your sounds. Now, I love these sounds, the Subtractor raw. I love it. Run it straight in with, like, you know, straight into the board with the basic default of core effects that everything else in the piece might be running through. However, you don't have to do that. In fact, every once in a while I've had a project where, say, the demand of the project requires a little bit more of a common sound, you know, or like a fit in with the people type sound. And so I might use a sampler, put the sampler in a combinator, and that's for another thing. I want to skip that right now because I want you to stay focused on just how much is happening with this is one waveform. We had all of this interaction going on. You know, the sounds minutely thinning out. We have a broad punch that hasn't required some sort of, you know, simply sound effect. I mean, it's actually affecting the envelope and the pitch so that we get this nice, you know, sweet, like real legit attack, you know. And there's no effects on this thing. I still haven't touched the resonant filter. So just as an example, I don't really like it doing hardly anything. So I'm going to allow myself to go maybe to Let's come in at about 18. There we go. I love how we have something interesting happening in the after too. And how I'm creating that chord, by the way, just a little music theory thing, some of you have probably figured it out. I'm taking an F major, but what's happening is I'm putting the 1 and the 5 of the triad in the bass, and then I'm putting the center, the 3, an octave above. There's 2 octaves. Okay, so this gives you an example of how much is going on that is often not touched on the device, and this is our most general purpose wave. There's a million other things you can do for it, but I want to save some things for the other waveforms as we go into them. We're going to have a lot of neat things we can do. So we've just, as a recap to sum it all up, we left the resonant filter for last. Strongly recommend this. We have our velocity. Instead of it losing this really cool, perfectly brightened usage of the frequency, not too much, not too little, we just shut it completely off because we don't want it bringing all of a sudden this big squelchy frequency every time we play a little bit harder or softer. Instead, we chose the velocity to modulate something a lot more subtle, which is simply the mix of 2 waveforms that are the same waveform, but again, these cool, minute details, you know, one of them is negative 16 cents and one of them is positive 16 cents. So that little tweak there is really cool, kind of gets that effect that happens when a guitarist might, you know, when people play, human beings play things like violins and guitars, one of the things that we synth players often miss out on is the idea that even when the violinist is playing the note perfectly, he's actually playing it a little bit different each time just because of all the little fibers on the hands and everything like that. So now we have this thing. We have something that we could... We have some little subtle effects there, and of course we could ramp that up if we wanted to. But there's something that I have planned for one of the other ones, so I want to hold off on that a little bit. On our second oscillator, instead of dropping it down to create, just huge depth overall, we want to keep it in the same octave and instead just rely on our synth there, and of course our big punch at the front of the sound. So that sweet front end of the sound, we know it's not happening by that because we waited to add that last. Instead, it's happening by the modulation envelope affecting the pitch of the second oscillator by a reasonably subtle amount. We got something there for sure. And then, of course, we have our sustain dancing around with something kind of interesting by simply selecting the oscillator 1 and 2 for the LFO2 to modulate at a reasonable amount, and you hear our rate is just kind of somewhere near the middle. Okay, so fantastic. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you learned some cool techniques in our Propellerheads Resonant Subtractor Synthesizer Lab tutorial. And this was the most general purpose and generic but incredibly usable waveform of them all. Waveform number 1, the Sawtooth, kind of an essential on any synthesizer. And so you may have picked up some cool details from that. Wait till you see what is ahead, okay? So thank you very much for tuning in. I'm your host, Marcus Unlimited. We'll see you next time.